Diablo 4 is not what I thought after 200 hours. It's not for you. Don't you tell me what to do. Let me be the judge of that. Is Diablo 4 for me? I hope so. I've been playing a load of it. Let me be the judge of that.
Hello and welcome back to RageGaming. My name is Holo. Today I want to talk
Oh my god.
Diablo 4
Fucking cheesy burns.
Endgame. I'm currently level 73.
He's higher level than I am. I'm like level 62, so he's definitely... He's 200 hours into the game at level 73. Dude, one of us is doing something wrong.
Nicely into tier 4 Torment. Now, at the current stage, I'm refining my build and gear setup. I'm hunting ancestral legendaries or making them. I'm praying to find the right uniques. I'm working in ideal...
Imagine finding uniques. Like, the uniques I find are like the same two over and over again.
Skills on my equipment. Basically, I'm rapidly approaching that point where, you know, I've achieved what I wanted to with my main class and build. In fact, upon reflection, nothing's really changed except for an increase in gear stats, while vice versa, the enemies have become harder and the nightmare dungeons feature more affixes and less revives. It's still a very satisfying process with my character, but there's a clear fall off in new content at a certain stage. So with this being my first discussion style video for Diablo 4, I want to talk about how I feel about the game in its final stage before Season 1 drops, and with that, ask you some big questions. What level are you right now? What are you working on? And is it fun? To start,
the final question is the important one. The final question out of all of those, like what level are you and whatever the second question was, because it was unimportant to me, and are you having fun? The honest question is, are you having fun with your time in the game and the gameplay loop? That is all that matters. Doesn't matter anything else. If you personally are having fun with the game, then it's a good game. If you are finding things monotonous, tedious, and you find that you're only playing the game to make number go big, and you start to realize that you're not enjoying it, and when you turn the game off, you're not like dying to get back in, or if you are, you're thinking about getting back in but for the wrong reasons, then the game's not for you.
let's talk about the
Or at least the game's not technically good, because a good game is something that makes you want to play it.
big important stuff. Diablo 4, in my opinion, has been a fantastic experience that I'm still enjoying and look forward to playing for some time. Before Season 1, I still plan to refine that main Necromancer build.
So, am I like the only dumb person here? Like, I feel like if your whole goal preseason is to get a build to play postseason, that's going to feel not fun. If you just spent 2 months perfecting a build just so you can play that build for the next 3 months, that doesn't sound fun to me at all. Like, my thought would be like, spend the preseason, play a couple characters, figure out some stuff. Next season, play a completely different character, try to have fun. Try to play 1 or 2 characters a season and try to enjoy the entire game over a year. I don't know that I want to do the exact same thing every fucking season. I did that in other games. Like, it got to the point when I was playing Destiny 2 that even though the new raids and everything were coming out, I was literally doing the exact same thing. So it was like, okay, new raid. It's literally the same thing as every other raid. You go in, you learn 1 or 2 mechanics, and it's done. You write down stuff, you pull up a spreadsheet, you pull up a chart, you put it on your other monitor, and you run. It's so boring now. The world, I watched Cross talk about it the other day, and what Cross was saying is the world feels small now, and it does, because nothing ever feels new. Do you know what I mean? Like, nothing feels new, nothing feels exciting. Everything feels like we've done it before, and Destiny's kind of lost its magic. You know what I mean? They need to add, like, every time, and it's kind of the issue we were talking about with Diablo 3, right? Like, the level scaling, bringing everything up to your level, making it to where you never out-level anything, or you never, like, have any content drop off that you never do. So it's very similar with Destiny 2. Like, it's the same monsters, it's the same enemies, it's the same reskins. You're doing the same thing all over and over again. Nothing feels new. Nothing feels exciting. It's just the era of modern gaming. Just trying to do the least amount as possible and trying to make the most money out of it.
I finished the Diablo 4 story, and I got this really fun challenge of the Capstone to unlock World Tier 3, and then this open world endgame.
I think the idea behind the Capstones is good, though. I think one thing that Diablo 4 did well, and did better than its predecessors, is the implementation of Capstones to sort of not really lock you out of zones, but to give you something to do to get into a new zone. I think that now in a season or two where, like, I'm tired of being locked out of these higher tier zones, I'm probably going to be frustrated. But for now, I think it was like a good implementation and like gives you something to look forward to.
There's the PvP, the daily style tasks.
Haven't tried the PvP yet. I've heard the PvP is actually quite disappointing because it's just a lot of one-shots, and that's what we didn't want to begin with. I didn't want like a prolonged, drawn-out PvP, but I didn't want it to be just like a one-shot fest, and that's pretty much what it sounds like.
There's the world bosses and legions.
The world bosses are so disappointing because supposedly I thought they were going to be on a 3-hour timer, and it turns out they're on like a 5 or 6 hour timer. And then on top of that, there's no worldwide notification when they pop up. So you have to be paying attention and see that they pop up to even know about them. So the world bosses are disappointing in that sense. I'm actually really disappointed that there's not some sort of in-game notification that they're popping up, especially because they're on such a long timer. If it was like top of every hour, I wouldn't really care. But the fact that they're intermittent is a huge problem.
Helltide events, and then the more consistent content of the Nightmare dungeons, which remind me a lot of Mythic Plus and WoW.
So the Helltides, I'm actually really disappointed because there are, in order to upgrade your gear the last time, you have to farm Helltides. And it seems like the mystery chest, the mysterious chest, is probably one of like the best ways to gear up on legendaries if you're not using like exploits. So they're really pushing you hard to spend time in these Helltide rifts. And then the Mythic Plus style keys that they're talking about in the dungeons, I'd originally thought that the Nightmare dungeons were going to feel like Mythic Plus, but they don't. Like, I don't know. Maybe they do to you guys, but to me, like, from the Mythic Pluses that I've ran when I played WoW, the keys don't feel like Mythic Plus at all. One of the things that made Mythic Plus feel unique was, like, your key had a set level, set things, set dungeons, and then you had to run your specific key, and if you did well, you could upgrade it, and if you did poorly, your key would downgrade. Diablo 4's sort of Nightmare Dungeons doesn't feel anything like that because you have so many keys, and you can break them down and make them and remake them, and you can do all these different things, so the keys themselves don't feel unique. And then with the XP scaling, going above and beyond and trying to do these harder sort of dungeons doesn't really net you anything other than just saying you've done the harder dungeon. And there's no gear tied to doing those harder dungeons, right? So it's not like if you run a level 80 key, or a tier 80 key, you're going to get something better than Ancestral that's going to boost you to sort of like the next item level floor so you can do harder content. There's none of that tied to it. So like I understand that a lot of people want to like equate the Nightmare dungeons to Mythic Plus keys, but I feel like they're not even whatsoever.
Multiple affixes that challenge you, where you kind of pick your poison style versions of the original dungeons, scaling up and up and up while helping me level my glyphs that I'm collecting. The Paragon board, which has been much more simple than I expected first looking at it, but
the Paragon board is way simpler than what it was. Like when everybody talked about the Paragon board, everybody talked like it was going to be this complicated thing. It's not. There's a couple nodes that you go find. You get the things you want from those nodes, and then you run to the next board. And then when you decide you want to socket glyphs, then the only thing is finding what glyphs have the right bonuses around them, like stat bonuses, and then put the right glyphs in the right boards, and then upgrade them as you want them. But they're not anything that crazy.
But quite satisfying to work on and gather points for. Then there's upgrading to sacred gear, refining your skills and build, eventually bringing you to the big challenge that is the Capstone that unlocks tier 4. And reflecting on that experience, it honestly seems to me like 50 to 70, aka Nightmare mode, is the perfect endgame for casual players. The majority of the player base, in fact, will get to experience all of that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that the majority of the player base is going to hit the 50 to 70 mark. You'll like the bulk of your players are going to be 50 to 70, and that is the experience that needs to feel good. 70 to 90 is going to be for people that are above casual, that play a little bit more than your casuals, and then anything in the current state of the game with the current XP system and current XP scaling, grinding level 100 plus just to do it and trying to do those high tier keys are going to be for your grinders.
Enjoy all of that, complete a build to that point in Nightmare tier 3, and maybe for a lot of people that'll be where they finish. By the time you reach level 70 and beyond, the leveling slows down hard, even after Torment mode pushes your XP gains.
That is why, so that's another thing, right? Because like the XP scaling is so tough, that's why everybody's using the easiest, fastest methods to level, and that's what we said long before the game came out, that it didn't matter how much content was in the game, as soon as people find out what's the most optimal, that's what everybody's going to do. The sad part is that the most optimal way to level in this game is to not use any of the in-game systems, but use some of the broken systems around like monsters being your level, and just use that to do the easiest content you can get your hands on the fastest, which is what has always happened. So it's one of those like feels bad man moments, but we called this long before the game came out.
At this point, the true endgame will really hit, and it doesn't seem to hit that hard in my opinion. There's no new content, just what you were already doing, with more gear drops and the next tier of power level in the form of Ancestrals. The Nightmare Dungeon gains 2 more negative affixes at tier 21 and above, and that's largely it for the big changes. You have the next big challenge with the next Capstone and Pinnacle boss of the season to beat, which, yeah, seems very hard, with balancing already happening to it actually, but it's basically do what you were already doing for an extended period of time. It still feels good, and I have my plans as I've explained, but there is a noticeable lack of content progression compared to tier.
I feel like, and once again, like no hate on Diablo, but I feel like this guy is being very generous in saying, you know, that he's not seeing sort of like a boredom or whatever. Like, doing what I'm currently doing, like, yeah, I'm fine with that. Like, everybody's going to be like doing what I'm doing, and seeing that as being the only foreseeable thing to do for the next 2 months has to feel bad.
2 to 3. What they've done though is actually really good for the player base majority. Not everyone is going to no life grind it like
100%.
myself and others at even higher levels. The casual player is going to have such a good content curve with this game. I think it's just ideal for people taking it at a more normal pace.
I agree with that. And that's one of the things we've said, was that this game was definitely going to be more of a casual game and was going to appeal to a larger casual audience. And I think that's what they've done. I think they've pretty much nailed that right on the head. I think that there's going to be some boredom for those players as well, but I think it's going to set in probably towards the middle of the first season, because that's just where I think they're going to start to see the peak at, right? I don't think that a lot of your casual players are going to be feeling the pinch right now.
So it's really well done, and I'm really happy with it, but it's also not perfect. And there's a few things I want to highlight that maybe sooner than Season 1 or in Season 1 we'll have addressed. The first and most important thing to me is this complete lack of loadouts. Loadouts meaning I can swap from build A to build B without like a really long or annoying process between it.
Yep, and this is one thing we were talking about earlier here on the channel, and we talk about this one frequently. The fact that they did not give us a way to save our loadouts has been one of the biggest frustrations prior to launch. This was something that was in Diablo 3, and there is legitimately no excuse to not have brought it into Diablo 4. I know I try to find ways to defend it, and there's things I talk about with the community where I try to find good ways of saying, well, maybe because of limitations, but let's be honest, there's literally no excuse to not have brought it forward.
I'm someone who wants to experiment and engage with the systems they've created.
Exactly.
Having no loadouts feels so bad. Swapping just from, say, my Bone Spear build to my Minion build and then back again is expensive not only on in-game gold, but the time to do it. It's honestly like really annoying. I have to slowly, manually undo Paragon points on the boards, redo the skill tree every time.
Not to mention, remember the exact gear you put on with the exact gems and all these other things. It is not good.
And there's the gear and where I've stored it and swapping that. It's pretty bad. But it's been said that this is what they want, that they want you to have one main build to focus on. I don't really get that. Like, is it to encourage you to make a second version of the same class? Surely not. It's the most offensive and just backwards when we think about, say, PvP. How are you meant to have a PvP build to engage with that gameplay? Okay, you make a PvP build, but just make sure you don't swap back to PvE too often, which, by the way, is most of the game. PvP's felt more of a nice mini game to engage with on the side.
From what I understand of PvP, it's not a mini game. It's just who gets the hit in first, right?
But not a main aspect of the game. A singular mode in a small area of the map. To not at least have a loadout for PvE and PvP at the bare minimum is crazy to me. So I really hope they walk back on that decision if that's what they've intentionally done. Please, loadouts would be awesome.
Even if the most bare minimum thing they did was they gave you an option to save a PvP and a PvE loadout, if that was all they did, that is still a 500% improvement over the current system.
Second is the lack of single target combat as a whole. World bosses are pretty neat, but they're far from a proper challenge, only even appearing occasionally of course. Meanwhile, the mostly mob clear nightmare dungeons, even at the higher tiers, might only have a boss at the end now and then. And that's high tier endgame pushing content. Majority is mob clear. Well, yeah, you've got the final pinnacle fight and that's going to be great. It's not exactly something you'll be doing often, and it's something to long term work towards.
But even trying to like flex your single target, like mechanic avoiding muscles, like a lot of the telegraphs in this game are decent, but they're not the best. A lot of the projectiles and stuff, like no matter how well you try to move, you still get hit by some of them because of just the way they seek. And for some classes, the lack of mobility. And then not to mention that like you can't dash past targets sometimes. You just dash into them and stop. So it's definitely a challenge to try to, because I've tried to do that on this. I don't know if Elias is the world tier 3 boss. But I tried to do it against Elias, and I constantly felt like no matter what I tried to do, I was still getting hit, and that the best option was just a full court press, which seems to take a lot away from the game. When every boss I fight, it seems like it is better for me to be on top of the boss, just pushing it as hard as I can, instead of trying to move around the boss. Now, maybe that's just because I'm a melee class. Maybe somebody like the Necro with like Bone Spear, or maybe like a Wizard or like a Source, maybe it is better for them to try to be at range and try to dodge attacks. But for me, up to this point, everything has felt like the best way to take out a boss is just to press it and don't stop.
Like a boss rush or single boss challenge for replay. The Capstone for tier 4, that's such a good example of a final fight where you face Elias again and deal with 6 to 7 genuinely punishing and engaging mechanics. Most dungeon bosses we fight, they have like 2 at best, and they're nowhere near as good. So I would love to see a single
It's very deceiving to say single target, because a lot of times in a lot of these boss fights, they spawn a shitload of minions, which means you're not even really engaging with the boss fight as much as you are just trying to, like, you're constantly being pressed by minions to keep moving and repositioning while you're trying to put out DPS, while you're trying to take out the minions, while you're trying to, like, avoid mechanics, instead of it just being, like, a genuine one-on-one fight. And that kind of detracts from the moment for me.
Target boss fight style endgame content to do.
So what are you wanting to be reminded?
To have unlocked when I hit tier 4, and it just didn't happen. Third point and last point for me is the quality of life stuff. Take your stash. It's so small. Only 4 tabs total,
And one of the biggest things, I'm going to move my head to the other side. One of the biggest things I've heard people bitch about is this box here. They're like, yeah, I get it for like aesthetics, but why is this even here when you could add 2 more stash rows and get rid of this entire box, right? So maybe this goes away with like some sort of seasonal thing, but this right here has been a huge point of contention for a lot of people.
While it's good to make you, have to manage things a bit, this is a bit over the top.
And all of that gear is for his fucking Necromancer. That's not counting any other characters he makes. I don't know, guys. What did you guys think of the thoughts after 200 hours? There was definitely some stuff brought up in here, and I feel like it's definitely a good sort of point of conversation, right? There's a lot of quality of life things that should have been brought over from previous titles and from Blizzard in general. They have a giant, vast pool of resources that they could have pulled from to add a bunch of quality of life things in here. I do honestly think that the game is good for a vanilla launch, but there are going to be some sort of shortcomings that are going to come to light sooner rather than later. I think that the important part of Diablo 4 was that it launched successfully with solid bones, and that's what the game has done. But I do think that it is always best to have healthy conversations around the game and to try to use that to propel what we need and what we want from a game moving forward. But let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think after spending as many hours as you have in the game. And as always, have a great day.